But yeah, this started during the pandemic. I was working home and giving CDP demos, and I was like, how do I make it look more interesting? And so I just kind of started buying pieces, and then I kept adding, and it became kind of like the pandemic hobby. And now I've just kept it with me, and I moved houses and reset it up, and so it's just fun. I enjoy it. It makes me happy.
I need to learn from you how to convince my partner to allow a little bit more decoration other than the I didn't consult with her for the LED lights here, but she's accepted it for what it is now. Hey, Zach, welcome to the show, Couch Confidentials. You are number 4 in season 2, so it's glad to have you on. I know I'm kind of envious of your setup. You've got all the brilliant lights there, the pin board with all the notes that somebody's most likely actually using. I've got one, but it's got nothing on it. My kids use it for doodling, but it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, this started during the pandemic. I was working home and giving CDP demos, and I was like, how do I make it look more interesting? And so I just kind of started buying pieces, and then I kept adding, and it became kind of like the pandemic hobby. And now I've just kept it with me, and I moved houses and reset it up, and so it's just fun. I enjoy it. It makes me happy.
I need to learn from you how to convince my partner to allow a little bit more decoration other than the I didn't consult with her for the LED lights here, but she's accepted it for what it is now.
The little wash lights, you can buy them on Amazon for like $20. They're like, it was like one of those like random finds in the middle of the night, and I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, hey, but I want to say for the people who don't know you, but in the CDP world, Zack Wenthe is I think raises a lot of eyebrows. People do know you, but for the select few who don't know you, could you do a quick introduction?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in the Martech space for a long time now. Started my career in actually in marketing, but I moved over to consulting, almost 17 years ago now at this point,
Okay.
16 years ago. And, I was a marketing technologist before Scott Brinker made that cool or made that a thing. And, that's where I started my career in working with companies, large scale digital transformation, strategy, always with some level of Martech underpinning, CRM, marketing automation, marketing resource management, campaign, you name it. And, I'd spent a long time just doing delivery work and, going from company to company to company. And at some point, I kind of just got, burned out on that and kind of got tired of, switching from project to project. And so I started looking for what was next. And, through a acquaintance, I ended up, joining a startup, in the tech space. They had kind of data. They were bringing, a lot of SMB data together, and lo and behold, the technology that they were doing that would be what would fundamentally be a CDP. At the time, wow. When I joined, they didn't call it that, but that's exactly how they were doing it. And then some of our customers started asking for us to not just bring the data together, but like give them the tool to do it themselves. And that's where I started in the CDP space. And almost 7 years ago now, and I've been at a variety of them now through either acquisition or job changes or whatnot. And so I've been doing CDP for a little while.
No, yeah, that's an understatement. I mean, I remember when the first time I came into touch with my first CDP. It wasn't even CDP at the time. It was just it was just doing the data connections, a real Google Tag Manager on steroids, full service side. And that was Segment at the time. So it's, we've definitely come a long way. And this is like 11, 12 years ago. So we've definitely come a long way since then. But as we say, this is a Dutch expression that I'm translating literally into English. So it's not going to make any sense to you. I have to fall into I have to fall with the door into the house, which is, I need to talk to you about your bold statement. Right before this, we started recording. You sent me an email about, we were just kind of updating the talking points that we wanted to discuss here. And as I was reading through it, there was just one, and I was like, wow, I need to pick your brain on this one. In it, you say that the data strategy, if you start looking at what we've accomplished, what companies have done in the last 5 years, will look I want to say child's play, but those weren't your words. You said it will look simple compared to the future. And as someone who's been in this space, like you said, you've been in this more than a decade, probably even two. How are you going to what's so daunting about the future?
Yeah. So here's where this came from. So at Tealium, we were at AI4 a few weeks ago, which was at a, AI conference. And I had the opportunity to speak. And, as I was preparing for that presentation, and I was kind of, taking the time to kind of look at what's on the horizon and then just reflect on the wild world it's been since, kind of 2020 and all of the changes. The reality is the last 5-7 years of customer data strategy has really been, still to this point, so much about collection, so much about just getting the data together. And we're still debating that in the industry, right? It's like, well, I'm collecting it all. Where do I put it? What's the right place for it to sit? And is it bucket A or bucket B? And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And I mean, every organization is different. There isn't one right way. The reason I say the future is going to change dramatically and look like child's play is two things, two big macro factors. One is the world has woken up to privacy and regulation of data. GDPR kind of kicked it off. There are 50 plus different privacy, policies in the United States, all in various forms of strength and control. AI is obviously going to accelerate and be a forcing function for all of that. And so how people have given data and are willing to give data has already changed. We've already seen a lot of that changing. Now we take that and we say, well, entrepreneurs like to ride a wave. We've seen Apple double down 2 or 3 times already on the privacy factor and the intelligence and keeping things local. And I
stripping out all the trackers. Yeah,
exactly. Cutting them out. iOS 14 was devastating for performance marketers, when Ask Not to Track came out, and all of that is going to continue and it's going to accelerate because now phones are getting stronger. You're going to be able to run local LLM models on your devices, and consumers are going to be a lot more in control of doing things locally. So I would say, let's start with privacy one, and we can dig into these if you want to, and then the other big macro factor is AI. This forcing function of AI, and everybody, I don't want it to sound cliche when I say, well, AI is going to change the world. AI is going to change human behavior. That's the thing that I think everybody is kind of forgetting about. We're all looking at, how do we optimize? What do we do? How can I be more efficient? But when you look at the stats already, how much search volume is changing or search behavior is changing because AI can get an answer without leaving a Google search result anymore. I can find it. If I need detail, I don't have to go to the homepage of a company anymore. I can go 7 layers deep to the actual answer and then leave. Those two things together are shifting the control to the consumer or to the individual. And I think that is going to dramatically change how brands collect data, interact with data. It's not going to be a brand-centric journey situation anymore. And so it's going to really require what brands have kind of used as a playbook for 10 or 20 years around collect data in some fashion, advertise them until they buy or till they, give up and then do it again. And that's the part that's going to change, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, if we look at how the behavior is changing, I agree with you there because there's been a lot of noise around Perplexity. I mean, everyone's coming out with their own browser now. Even Claude, Anthropic is, I think they're actively testing now. They've opened it up to 1,000 max users for beta testing. I agree with you in the sense that, tracking might change. I'm just wondering whose benefit is this change going to be for? You mentioned phones are getting stronger. We can run the models locally, but does that mean that the app in which these models are run on and all the prompts submitted to will be the best source of that data? I mean, Google now with the AI summaries, they've fully admitted it themselves. It's withholding traffic to the actual websites on which the content is on. So detecting user behavior on your website is limited. So does this reinforce the argument that we need to get into first party, we need to get into our own apps and make sure we track everything there? Because otherwise we're putting everything in the hands of this next generation browsers, the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, etc.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think, and it's going to change what your understanding of first party data is. Let me explain. Yeah. So it's not just going to be a situation where you have, massive amounts of anonymous data, anonymous people, browsing, and then you give them some incentive to give, first party information. And then they do a lot of research on your website. They're going to come to your website and buy, and then they're going to leave. Right. And a lot of the consumer behavior, we've already seen that first shift. Pandemic drove a once in a lifetime, normally like consumers change their behavior, like at life points, right? I get married, I had a kid, I moved houses, like the entire world went through that shift at once, where people who didn't buy online all of a sudden started shopping online, groceries started getting delivered to your house. You thought about your relationship with brands, if either through supply chain issues, through closures, through availability, whatever, your brand didn't have something, you're like, well, there's an alternative out there, and yeah, sure, I'll just order it online. And so that first shift, coupled with the fact that now AI can surface answers to product searches, answers to travel searches, answers to whatever, and the value that, and even if it's not perfect today, there are flaws. It's not great in all scenarios, but if you look at how exponentially fast that is moving and how exponentially improved some of this is happening in 6 months, 8 months, a year, like we could have a whole different conversation about how agentic browsers are behaving. And so consumers are going to have a lot more power to do research. I think when I was in marketing and when I was in college, I've always been fascinated in my like geek out hobby has been like consumer behavior. And I was a member of the Society of Consumer Psychology for a while, not smart enough to be around them. I just joined it because their journal was cool to read. Cool. I don't know. Fun to read.
No, cool. Say it like it is, man. It's okay.
But one of the biggest factors for people just making a buying decision is fatigue, right? I've started searching. I need this. I'm tired of looking. I'm going to buy. Right. And so the fact
sounds like my wife and I looking for a holiday.
Yeah. Right. You're like, I've looked long enough to not feel guilty, but I'm not going to go any further because the risk reward benefit of it is not there. And brands bank on that in a lot of cases, and they should. Like, that's totally a viable. They're not, taking advantage of somebody. That's just the reality of like, hey, if I can make it easy, reduce friction, give them the answers, they're probably going to land here and they're probably not going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, well, now they're one aspect of human behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And now they're not going to land there and do that research. They're going to be doing it on their device, either in, like you said, Comet or Anthropic, or, if Apple Intelligence gets its act together, potentially there.
Knock on wood.
I mean, Gemini's got its own now embedded model on their new Pixel phones. And, I haven't played with it, but that's the way the world is going to go. It's good for consumers, honestly, because it gives you a whole lot more reach in your education, in your study, in your research mode of buying.
Yeah.
It's bad for brands because people are going to show up out of nowhere and you're not going to have any idea where they came from, and then they're going to disappear again.
I absolutely agree with you on that one. I was my son's getting a mortgage, and I had to help him this afternoon, or this morning actually, at the mortgage office. It works a little bit different here. So the guy was looking through an archaic system of terms and conditions and all these PDFs, and I was just sitting there in ChatGPT searching for the answers, and not necessarily to kind of rub his nose in it, but just to kind of see, all right, I've got an answer now. I'm just going to see how long it takes him to find the answer, and then match what we find. And in the two instances that I did test it, ChatGPT was right. Because I'm always a little bit worried. Is it out? Is the data outdated? Is it incorrect? Is it hallucinating? But yeah, I mean, it is growing in confidence. The only thing, again, and I'm probably sounding like that broken record again. I'm worried about, in about 10 to 15 years time, probably sooner, are we going to get the same kind of situation that Google has with Chrome right now, that they're allowed to keep it, but now they have to share some of that search data? And like you said, it's good for the consumers, but it's bad for the brands. Do you? Yeah. And I really want to get into the topic of AI4 because, but just one last question on this topic: do you feel that we'll be heading out to a situation like that, or are we? In your view, what does that look like? Because
I mean, I think the consolidation of data is inevitable in our society. That's just how, I mean, the fact that, Google gets to keep Chrome, great, could be bad, could be fine. I think you could debate both sides of it. I love the fact that Perplexity tried to offer to buy it for like double their valuation. What a great, I don't know if it was a PR move or just, a brilliant strategy. But, like just big brands have the resources to be at the front edge of this. And then you get that first mover advantage. And I think that's going to continue. I do think the idea of as on-device models become more popular, and become more capable and become more tied into not, let's call it external knowledge, which is, search and websites and brands and but more your personal knowledge, your calendar, your text messages, and it's processing and happening. And let's all pretend it's completely compliant and private. And, like just for the sake of this, we can debate that in the future. But, let's, it's all happening. The fact that I can where did we go to that restaurant 3 weeks ago? I forgot its name, but I loved it. And your phone can tell you that. It's going to change how consumers, again, interact. They don't need to go out to Google and then maybe get distracted by the fact that they can't find the restaurant or the song or the whatever.
That's
and they
cool
find something else. So I think that world is going to give consumers still the ability to, navigate, even though there's big players, but let's not sleep on the fact that yes, absolutely, personalization in devices. And it was one of the things I talked about at AI4. Personalizations in apps like ChatGPT are a big driver for repeat activity, for you being on their device and being a daily active user. That's a strategy for them, and it will be very beneficial for consumers. But yes, it means that they collect more data and they potentially become a walled garden in the future.
No, absolutely, and we're seeing it with Anthropic now, putting in memory into Claude. I like the example of the restaurant 3 weeks ago. I'm still enjoying the Photos app where I can just type in a keyword, and it'll throw me out all these photos that matches maybe someone's face or a person that I'm looking for, or a certain age or a certain object. I think that's fantastic. But you made a nice segue, and I thank you for that. We didn't even practice that, but AI4 in Las Vegas. Before we get into the actual conference itself, I'm in Europe, you're in the US. There's a lot of rumors here on this side that it's very quiet now in Las Vegas with a lot of tourists staying away. And I just want to kind of get a firsthand impression from you. Is that what you experienced?
I would say, and I didn't leave I've been to Vegas so many times. It's less exciting to me to go wander around. So, I didn't go around too much.
Down on your phone. Yeah,
exactly. It was hotel, convention center, convention center, avoid the casino. And yes, I would say it's quieter than it has been. At times it's also August. When I was there, it was August. And it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is hot and desert. I mean, it's dry desert air. So there's some of that. Ironically, I did talk to my Uber driver about it at one point, and he said, yeah, it's slower than it has been in the last couple of years.
Okay.
So he didn't seem panicked about it. So it was one of those, it was a bad summer, but he wasn't fleeing Vegas.
No. All right. But AI4. So you and I feel, at least, well, let me talk about me personally. I feel like I am stuck in this LinkedIn bubble at times. Where it's kind of like a merry-go-round. We see the face. No offense, people who are watching this. No offense to you. I love you guys on LinkedIn. But I feel that it's this little merry-go-round that we're stuck in. But you actually got on the ground in Las Vegas and were able to talk to marketeers and technologists about the topic of AI. A couple of questions. I mean, is it Are you hearing different stories that we're seeing online? Any cool practical examples that you were shared with you?
Yeah, it was such a unique conference because it was 8,000 attendees, lots of vendors,
Wow.
but it was such a wide like topic area because you had everything from I sat in a session with Perplexity and they're talking about how they build research into Perplexity, and it was way over my head, but it was fascinating kind of
Yeah.
situation, but very technical, all the way to the other side of like the business of it, and preparing for the change or disruption and hardware. So there was a good mix, and I think that's actually for an industry that is so much, I'll call it, in turmoil, where it's kind of all over the board. It was a good
Yeah.
way of people kind of getting exposed to a lot of things, good and bad, right? And I think get some different ideas. You can see that like there are a dozen ways to do things, and either that excites you or that terrifies you. But I would say two big takeaways from the event, just from like listening and talking and whatnot, is, and I'll preface it that I'm sure it is an AI conference, so there's somewhat of an isolated bubble effect there. But
Yeah.
we've seen the reports that 95% of AI projects are failures or whatever, which I think is already a flawed report to
Yeah.
begin with, based on how they determine success. And that wasn't the like vibe or feeling or like approach at the conference. There were a lot of people who were like, "Oh yeah, we're testing, we're trying. Is it perfect? No. Are we seeing success? Absolutely. This is where we want to go now." And I think, there was a lot of optimism for it. There's still a lot of healthy skepticism. I think people are over the honeymoon and romance phase of
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah.
AI. At least, if you're attending an AI conference, maybe they are. And, so approaching it pragmatically.
Some have actually made it out of the trough of disillusionment, I guess.
I think so, and so, yeah, it was a good show. Obviously, Tealium has, we have a perspective. I personally have a perspective. I got to talk to a lot of people, but I just love to like going to trade shows is like one of my favorite parts of my job, is just like getting out, because you get like you said, you get out of your bubble and you get a chance to have dozens of conversations in a couple hours, and then, let your brain kind of put all that together, and you're like, oh wow, okay, cool, this is happening. Or you get to test a thought and an idea. And I think for AI specifically, if people are focused on AI, that's part of their job, or they're investigating it, like do these type of conferences. Go. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but just, like, doesn't have to be AI for, but go to those, talk to others. I think that is going to be a huge factor that will determine success.
No, absolutely. And I've actually, I think I've made a few posts about that on LinkedIn in the past, is that I'm so enamored about how many of the CDP vendors are kind of taking their own approach to implementing, or at least enabling AI within their platform. I don't want to go into anything brand specific, but it's, I think going to these conventions can give you the same kind of feeling. Just being able to see how company X is applying AI to their features or their content compared to another company. And I guess in that sense, it can be very inspiring. And you take home a lot of new ideas that, like you just said, some people are, hey, we're testing with it. We're trying to determine what the results are. And it's good to hear. But before we forget, I mean, and again, I spoke to a couple of your colleagues in the past around MCPs. What are you mentioned AI at Tealium. What are some of the kind of things that you've seen happening within the last few weeks or months? Or I don't know if you're even allowed to elaborate on anything that's coming, let's say Q4.
Sure.
In terms of AI at Tealium.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, we've had a message, and we continue to have this vision. And I think it's, it's maybe not the like shiniest object in the world, but I think it's one of the most important ones, which is good AI comes from good data. And so if brands are going to be doing personalization using AI, or if they're going to be implementing decisioning or any kind of other logic with an agent, having good, consented, real-time data about your customers, their preferences, their purchase behaviors, all of those things are going to be super important, to feed that engine, right? And so while that's not like, oh, here's shiny object, which we have some of those too. But like, I think that's a foundation that we cannot like forget as a enterprise data type, people, not just at Tealium, not just our customers, but like across the industry, like that there's so much value that comes from your customer data. It can be your best strategic asset if it's available when you need it, where you need it, at those moments where it matters. And so that is our foundation, and everything else we do stems from that, right? So MCP was about making that data, our real-time data available, to an AI in a moment so that you could influence a purchase decision, or you can drive better creative downstream, X, Y, and Z.
And make it easier.
The same thing is happening inside the app as we have more just efficiency tools within how to, better search for data fields, how to, you've run tag management before, like being able to just keep track of like what change I made, why I made it, and whatnot is one of those like necessary evils, but often, neglected. And so that's a great use case for AI, just to help kind of, type out the description of the change you made, or the field, or the tag.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm actually working on a project now with Zoho. I mean, they have their strengths, but I'm literally hitting my head against the wall trying to figure out how to get an ID from one to the other, because it's a glued together system to some respect. So it always makes it, you think, hey, it should integrate naturally, but it just doesn't. And yeah, I think it's funny that you mentioned, and I really appreciate that Tealium's taking like a sober approach, which is kind of a Dutch term that we use to say, hey, you're being level-headed about your approach to AI. You're not overhyping it, but you are applying it and offering in a way that could be useful to the customers, but you're not, jamming it down their throats that a lot of AI vendors, Martech AI vendors, I feel like some of them are doing. I won't mention names, but to come back to that point around data quality, because like you said, it all depends on consent, especially that one, but the biggest one is still data quality. From your experience, so let's move away from the Tealium side, but from your experience, and if you've got a lot, data quality has always been a problem. Have you seen good practices or changes within companies, or have you found ways to improve that? And I'm asking for a friend on this one, because they come across it all the time, and maybe I can give them some tips. Yeah.
I think one is there is no one size fits all, because it's generally anymore, it's not a technology problem. It's not, it's a people process problem most of the time, right? It's either parts of the organization are not talking to each other. I'm sure you've run into this. I know I ran into this when I was in consulting often, where I'd go in to kick off a project, or we'd be doing discovery or whatever part, and there would be teams that were meeting each other literally for the first time in our meetings. And you're like, solve that first, and then the rest of this will get a whole lot easier, and some of that's function, like, some of that's politics.
You need to introduce yourself to each other as well. I mean,
right. What do you do here? Oh, you work here, Yeah, I saw that too many times.
True stories. Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think the reality is the enterprise organizations that do it well, are communicated, or they're communicative to each other, where they're sharing what they're seeing, what they're learning, and they have a community mindset, as opposed to us versus them. So often, I know it's cliche, like this IT versus marketing, or, sales versus marketing. And there's a lot of truth to it, but a lot of that is also just people get busy. They get in their silos. They do their task, task A.
Heads down.
I don't care what task B is. I have to get task A done because that's what I'm measured on, comped on, scared of losing my job if I don't do, kind of thing. And all of that forces barriers. So to answer your question, one of the best things that I've seen, I'll give you two. Centers of excellence, having a team that gets together cross-functionally every month and just talks about the data strategy. What are we doing? What are we collecting? What are we seeing? What opportunities?
Would you label that the same as the community?
Yeah.
center
I
of
mean,
excellence?
obviously, I think that fosters community, right? That fosters
Yeah,
that relationship
in
where,
that sense, yeah, okay.
but I think there's two levels to that. One is there's the executive presence of having the executives hear what's working, what's not, whatever. In a open collaborative environment, this is not a let's get together and resolve all these red flagged issues. Like there's
Yeah,
separate meetings for that. This is like, let's get together and talk about what's good and what could be better, and then allow the leaders of those teams to go back and filter that information down. And then hopefully, obviously, then there's in the interim between those meetings, teams working together to, hey, we figured, we have this data point or we've done this ideally, right? And the good ones do that. The other piece that I think is critical and crucial and hard, especially at large enterprise organizations, is a data dictionary. Especially a customer data dictionary, having
yeah,
a map of everywhere you are collecting customer data and everywhere it's going. In a
yeah.
perfect world, you have every attribute and field, but like start simple.
One of my first questions, I love that one.
Yeah,
Happens
is just
yeah,
it's just figure it out. Like get together. Like, what are we collecting? Well, okay, here's everything that's coming on the website. Where does it go from there? And having
yeah,
that map opens you up for a lot of optimization. One
yeah,
being back to what we said, communication, efficiency, whatever. But it also allows you to find we've got PII potential problems over here, or we're collecting, something we shouldn't,
yeah.
or we're collecting this and nobody uses it, and then it's, do we need to keep collecting this? Is this efficient? Is it valuable? And so I think those type of projects that are product agnostic, technology agnostic, CDP agnostic, it works in CDP, it works in ESP, it works, it doesn't matter, personalization platforms,
No,
whatever. All of them are based off of that centralized concept of, we have data coming in and data going out. And if we don't know where it is, how do we ever believe we're going to manage it?
yeah. And the realization once you do these kind of sessions, it's usually one of the first ones that I do is like, hey, let's sketch out your stack and your flow
Yep.
of where your data is coming from and going to. And I had one 2 weeks ago where a person said, yeah, what about Typeform? I was like, yeah, but how do you use it? They said, well, we send out personalized emails with a link to a Typeform to collect feedback on a specific service or product that they were selling. I was like, is it linked to a customer? Yeah, absolutely do it. Only to realize at that point, I really starts off the discussion saying, yeah, but we're not linking it back to that centralized location. So we are collecting it, but we're not adding it for building out that user profile. And I think that was one of those cool insights where people just said, hey, well, we never really thought about it in that way. We just think, hey, we have the CDP and that's what we got to work with. And I said, no, you also have to feed it. And I love those kind of sessions because just being able to open up people's eyes. And I wrote about this recently where I said, you need to train your crew, you need to train your people before you start working with the CDP. And too often, I think those are the moments that you used to get called into is post fact is, post implementation. We have the CDP. Our agency doesn't know how to help us further. What do we do with this thing? And that's because of that, like you said, that lack of knowledge. I like that you use the word community because it reminds me of Chiang Kai-Feng with his book, Humanizing Data Strategy, where he does talk about the 5 C's around data strategy, one of them being community. So it's pretty amazing that the answer might lie within arm's reach of solving all these tech issues. So talking about just a few more questions around AI, because you said if the data quality is good and your thoughts around, let's say that somebody went to AI4, got really inspired, and it came up with some creative ideas. How do you see this? Because I think you mentioned it as co-personalization, and that's definitely going to be one of the biggest benefits but of at least applying AI on top of your existing customer data. How do you envision that, or what kind of recommendations would you have for companies who would want to combine those two powers internally?
Yeah. So I would say there's the internal element and then there's the external element. So let's start internally, right? When you're thinking about the projects you're doing for AI, and let's say customer facing projects for AI, I think now more than ever, you have to, it's not, I mean, it's not optional to take a customer first lens. You know, what the brand wants is important and should be part of the equation. But if you approach as a brand, if you're approaching things as, hey, we have to pitch this product on, this August and it's going to be X, Y, and Z and and you don't stop and be like, okay, how does the consumer engage with that? What do they get? And that's your first thought. People are already like leaving brands over simpler things than that, right? And so I think the AI side of that is just going to accelerate that. And it's been a problem that the brands have struggled with for a long time. It's not a new one. The solution is tough because, again, I get it. All enterprise organizations are built to reach goals, make money, do things. And you still can. And those who actually stop and focus on the consumer and focus on the customer are proving that they can be profitable. And in fact, we have a whole new generation of kids coming up who are weighing very, very heavily on that criteria of, do I feel heard? Do I feel aligned with this brand? Way more than features, benefits, everything. And it's not just a B2C problem. It's a B2B problem too. Dentsu does a superpower study where they talk to B2B buyers every year. And last year, it wasn't until number 7 of the criteria of buying criteria that they said features and benefits met my company's goals. Above that, the number one thing is, do I feel comfortable signing a contract with this company? Am I willing to put my name on the dotted line, so to speak? And now if you think about that, if that's happening in B2B, B2C is 5-7 years ahead of all of that kind of thought process, right? People are,
it's amplified even more, and you
don't have a buying committee, and you don't have, you just, it's your buying committee is you and, maybe your spouse or your parents or whatever. So we just have to realize that consumers have options. And if you're going to do an AI project that benefits you as a brand only, but makes it harder for the consumer to interact, puts another layer, adds friction, they're going to find another way around it, plain and simple. Now, on the external side, so if you can get around and you can think about, okay, consumer first, and we believe that and we buy that, then the follow-up is great. Now, how do I become the company that removes those barriers that others are putting up, right? How do I help them co-personalize? Where can I send them information, or give them a better search? My favorite example, I talk about AI search because it's still so bad when you go to a brand right now and I search for, I need a comfortable golf shirt to wear to Vegas in August because it's hot. And, it's here's 3 shirts. And it's based on, it's just, it's a list and it's a thing.
Yeah.
We have the ability, the technology is there. Consumers have the desire. It's not hard to imagine a world where I go in and I say into a chat, what are you shopping for? Well, I need a golf shirt, and I've shopped for this brand before, so it knows what I've bought. It can look at the weather in August in Vegas and know it's hot and it's miserable, so we need a moisture wicking shirt or, light colors, or it can refine that search criteria. And oh, by the way, you've bought this one in the past. Might we consider you pair these pair of pants with the shirt you already have?
If they start color matching, we've reached an and
I'm done. And oh, by the way, Google just rolled out what they aptly named Nano Banana, which is their image editing, image creation tool. I
saw it, yeah.
The fact that it could take a picture of an individual, and I'm model or me or whatever, and it could take that shirt, put it on me, put me in Vegas as a backdrop. So it's here, imagine this is what you'd look like, and it would do it in seconds, and it would do it with scary accuracy.
All right.
I'm not saying that's the right way.
No, I tried image gen a few months ago. It was quite horrible. But you make some interesting points there that it's especially around the product. I mean, even like I mentioned this afternoon, I was at the mortgage place, and my son was like, from which bank do you want to get a mortgage? And you're right. He is, it's, and I don't want to say emotional, but it's a well thought out decision that they're making based on, does the company that they're going to go sign a contract with fit with their personal identity. And it came down to, I think, investments into military companies, et cetera, building out military equipment. He didn't want that. So good for him. And there are plenty of options. And I think that's a definite benefit with the current consumer market, is that there are a lot of different options available. The question is, of course, how are brands going to bite their teeth into this and make sure that, within these browsers that are being produced by these AI platforms are going to, again, as you point out, deliver the right product at the right time, personalized to the situation that you're working towards. Yeah, it's interesting times. Anyway, Zach, thank you for your time today.
And that's why I said, I was just saying, and that's exactly why the next 5 years is going to be wildly different than the last 5. So I think we've summed that up pretty good.
No, you absolutely have. Yeah. Well, thanks to Stan Lee for attending us this whole podcast as well. Yeah, super brilliant. I like that one. But thanks a lot for your time. It was great talking to you. And again, even though you are from Tealium, we could have spoken a lot about CDPs, but I really loved hearing about your perspective around AI and how the effects that are going to happen on the data strategy aspects of the work that we do for the future. So it's been great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.